think we're live.
Yeah, I think we're probably good to go. Let's wait.
Okay, cool. Hello guys, welcome back to our live series on creative coding. This is session 3. And today we have a new face who I will let them introduce themselves. But before we do that, my name is Jiwan. I am a curriculum developer at Codecademy. And we also have...
Hello, I'm Alex. I'm also a curriculum developer at Codecademy. Super excited to have Cassie here today. Very fun to get some guests talking about creative coding. So Cassie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Cassie Tarakajian. I use they, them pronouns, and I am just here to talk about a little bit about my work and then a project I've been working on for 5 years now, which is the P5 editor, which is like a platform that will let you write P5 sketches in. But I'll just kind of like introduce myself first. So let me do the screen share thing and play this. Did it work? Oh no, it's thinking.
Looks good to me.
Oh, there we go. So hi, it's me. And so I am a technologist, an educator, an artist, musician. So I kind of do like a bunch of different things. I'm a technologist. I write code. I make this web editor for P5. I also have a bunch of experience just working on different types of creative coding software in general. I would say my work is really focused on software for creation. I've worked on, I worked at Cycling 74, which is a company that makes software called Maximus C, which is a different creative coding tool. I also have just worked as a web developer, but I also do a lot of teaching. So here's a picture of me teaching in the before times. I was teaching a Maximus P workshop here, and I also am an adjunct professor at NYU ITP. I'm teaching there this semester a class on culture, internet culture and memes and that kind of stuff. On
that sounds fun.
Yeah, a class on cursed content, if you're familiar with cursed content. So that's really fun. I also have some creative projects that I do that are kind of in the space of art and technology. So I had this project a few years ago called Wikisonnet, which scanned all of Wikipedia and found all of the sentences that people had written that were in iambic pentameter, which is a stress unstress thing. So the form of the unstructured and if, and then it assembled them all into Elizabethan sonnets. So sometimes they were kind of nonsensical, but just kind of it's one of those things that it's so difficult if you're I want to sit down and write a sentence in iambic pentameter. It's quite difficult to do, but if you were constantly doing it accidentally all the time, and I think it's fun to take transform sentences that were used for just to be information, right? Like Wikipedia is a place to just share information and then recontextualize it as poetry. I really proposal for a hypertext project as iambic pentameter. Unfortunately the project is it was costly to run and generate these sonnets, so it's no longer a real website, but that's just a past project. And this was a web application that had a whole server backend. I was you could generate them real time, which is fun, and maybe we should try to just get the ones that we generated hosting up, but future. I also have an app that I made that tells you whether or not you're holding your phone. This is just more just a dumb kind of project. This is part of made this at the stupid hackathon at NYU ITP.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I also had like a musical project I was part of called Lullabies for AI, which was about like making music for like the like machine learning, artificial intelligent like children we're bringing to the world, like showing them how to like exist in the world and be like loving creatures. And I also just like want to give a shout out to like Neopets because it's just like I think it's just like vitally important to like how I like experience computers. I think it was like the first website that I like spent a lot of time on and like put a lot of energy into. And it was also the first place that I ever learned how to write code. Like on this website, you could like you would have like a bunch of pets that you could like give them different like colors, and you could like build a home from them and have a shop. There's like a stock market. You can do so much on it. It's a really fun website. And but you could make like a website for your pet, and so they would just give you like this giant like text, like no syntax highlighting, just like literally like a text area or whatever, and you would just like edit the HTML, and you like put any CSS like in line, and that's how you would have your web page. And I like wish I had an example of one of the ones I made, but when I like logged back into my account many years later, it had like been hacked and like all my accounts were gone.
Oh,
Yeah,
So,
that's funny. I feel like I've heard that story a couple of times of Neopets really being like the introduction to coding. I'm curious. So this is a series for basically beginners to creative coding, where we're just introducing them to P5. I'm curious, like how do you even get started with creative coding, where you're talking about like, oh, I made this like silly app that's telling if I like am holding my phone or not, or I'm, you know, I have this iambic pentameter generating thing. How do you even like get into the community? How do you like, do you remember what your first like creative coding project was, or how you even began?
I don't remember. I'd have to like really. Oh, you know, actually, I think that I got into it because I think I like, you know, I kind of would like make websites on Neopets. I also, you know, I think it's sort of like the same era was really into like making myself have like an awesome emo MySpace page. You know, that was like my vibe. And then sort of like I like studied like engineering in undergrad, and sort of that felt really like divorced from that world, where it was more like, oh, we're just kind of like learning how to code, but it wasn't as much focused on like output and like this is what we're like going to do with code. And then I like ended up taking a course that was about making like computer music, because like I have like a background in music as well, and I was just kind of like, I don't know, maybe I'll like see what this is. And we used this this like creative coding language called Pure Data, which is kind of like the predecessor to Max MSP. And so that was like my first experience with creative coding, was like using this tool. And like what I would do with it is kind of like jump between different like audio samples and like be processing audio and like cutting that up. I also did a project where I like used like a Wiimote as like a input on a, so that was kind of like my start. And then from there started like learning about like processing, and then just like started making sketches and just found it really like satisfying, as opposed to like the type of software development work I was doing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So I used to be a high school computer science teacher, and I used P5 all the time for like introducing people into programming. And I do think that no matter what the software is for you, it was this music program. I think P5 is obviously like a really incredible tool to get people into coding. But yeah, it's, for me, it's just like getting that foot in the door, and then as soon as you can make your first project, you can take it in any sort of direction that you want to, where it's like, okay, I'm into music, let me like dive deep into how audio works in coding. Or P5 is obviously very visual, but yeah, being able to do something that is so like output focused rather than just learning to code to learn how to code, I think is great. And it's one of the reasons why I love that G1 that you made this creative coding class.
But I also think there's a huge value in people seeing that coding isn't just something like scary that, runs your computer, which it does, but like, for example, it does.
I love
But
that.
like, for an example of like Neopets, it kind of like really makes coding to something like just a tool to make a little website for your pet, for example. So it gives you that purpose and it gives you that visual feedback of what you're doing with code. And then it I think when you put programming in that context, it becomes a lot easier to digest and a lot like more interesting, I think, immediately. For some people, I'm not going to generalize it and say that everyone would feel that way, but I think it's just a different perspective of like, you might want to make something practical, super practical, and want to dig deeper into like web programming and want to like learn about backend programming and all that kind of stuff. But like if with creative coding, it really is not necessarily thinking about the end output, but really like getting into that feeling of using coding to be more of a creative outlet.
Totally.
Cool. Should we move on from Neopets? We could talk about it all day.
Yeah, I kind of have like some slides about like the history of like processing and stuff.
Yeah, so maybe we can give a little bit of a context, Cassie, about like how we've been introducing creative coding and also P5. Basically, in our first live series, we introduced P5 JS as a JavaScript library, right? It's an open source JavaScript library that makes drawing with code really easy. And actually, one of the questions that we did get when we're talking about P5 for the first time was someone in the chat asked, how is this relevant to processing? What is the difference between processing and P5? And I did my best attempt at trying to answer that, but I think you might have a lot more context about the history.
Yeah, I actually have like I like spent some time like looking at the history. It's pretty fun. I think like I just like in general am really interested about like, how like just sort of seeing the evolution of technology and how that like impacts the sort of like things that people can make with like computing or technology or whatever. Sort of like how it's also entwined in like political things and stuff like that. But yeah, so here I can like go back to slide land. So yeah, like I think one cool thing about processing is that it comes from this like lab at the MIT Media Lab called the Aesthetics and Computing Lab, and it was at the time, and this was like in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was headed by this person named John Maeda. And I don't know if he was specifically the person who like coined the term creative coding, but definitely like was a person who, or he's still alive, is a person, is very, very much living, is a person who was just like a figure in that way, and just like advocating for creative coding and like using technology and like specifically using like code syntax as a medium for art, not just like computers, but like code syntax, which I think is really important when talking about processing in P5, because like one of the big parts of it is that you're writing code syntax. It's not just like you're connecting, there's no like graphical interface, right? It's like teaching you to interact with computers in that way, or that just is the medium. So anyway, it came out of this laboratory from two people who were doing PhDs there, Casey, Reese, and Ben Fry, who now are my colleagues at Processing Foundation. And the first release of processing was actually August 9th, 2001. The executive director of Processing Foundation, Dorothy, told me this recently, and she was like, processing is a Leo, which I loved. Yeah, and it like kind of consists of like three different things, which are like this language, which you can see like on the right here, it has this specific type of syntax where you see like this void setup and like void draw, and like it has this whole scaffolding of like what like this specific code syntax of what it looks like to like draw images that you can see on the left. You can see that this was actually like the beta version, some like early version of processing, which is pretty fun. So, right, you have like the like syntax of the language, you have like the environment that it's in, and that's like what this code is sitting in and like what the code renders to, right? It's all part of this application that you download, and then it like makes it simple to write this code. And, you know, all of this was driven at the time by like, you used to have to have like really specialized knowledge in order to like use computers to make this kind of art. And like at the time that Ben and Casey were working on processing, it was like cheaper. It was like the type of graphics hardware and the type of computers that you needed were getting much more accessible. So it was sort of like at this perfect time to be like, what if we tried to make a language that made these tools and like an environment that made these tools really accessible? And like the last part of the last like really like big piece of this, besides the environment and the language, is like the community. And they started off just like the processing forum. You can actually see that it's called like discourse, which I think is like which is funny since now there's like this, I actually don't know if discourse is open source. Might not be, but there's like the forum tool is now called discourse.
Right, again. Full circle.
Yeah, it's like a really full circle. But
Cassie,
oh, yeah.
I'm curious about if you go back to that line, the previous slide, what is the relationship between processing and Java? Because when I also used to teach with processing, and I used to say like, okay, P5 is kind of this JavaScript library that you can add on to your normal JavaScript. And I always used to describe processing as like, processing is just Java, but with, you know, the setup function and the draw function and these like special little add-ons. So is processing its own unique language? Is it a like, you know, variant of Java? If for our viewers, if you're watching this, you'll see that, you know, the things that stick out to this as being Java-like are the like square brackets to indicate an array. So yeah, I guess what's the relationship to Java for processing?
Yeah, it's actually like processing is actually also like a library. Like it's a library for Java. But I think what makes it like feel really different from P5 is that like it's not like the typical like environment that you would write Java in. There are all these different tools. Like one of the big ones is called Eclipse, the environment that folks will write Java in. And you know, and the reason is that like Java, I think in general is just like a more difficult tool to use, just because like the way that you have to like connect all the libraries together and stuff. And so like what this environment was created to do was to make that easier, right? Is so that like you wouldn't have to be an expert about, you know, how to like compile Java code. And like, right, when you're writing Java code, there's like a separate step of like translating this, this code into like the machine code, like to zeros and ones that like your computer can understand. Whereas like in JavaScript, it literally works differently, where it like reads each singular line of code and like translates it to like the like zeros and ones like in real time. So it like, because it has this like extra step of like compiling it all together, you have to like pull in all these, it like makes it harder to use.
Right, even getting that window with all the graphic stuff inside would be difficult to do if you wanted to do it from scratch using Java. So this was really like a hit, I'd say, when you could just download like a little software and you didn't have to worry about building your Java application or anything. You can just solely focus on creating visual things inside of it.
Yeah, I mean, this is like incredible. I mean, like in 2001, 2002, that you could like download this app and like make Java. And like at the time you could run Java in the browser. You could make like Java applets, which now I think are at this point are basically defunct, and no one uses them anymore. But it's kind of like the similar thing where it's like you could write code that like you could share in the same way, and that is so powerful. So Yeah, I think what also really like held the like processing together like was the community and having this space. And I think one of the like main sort of the canonical processing things that I always think about is like the like one post on the board that's about like introducing yourself and like who you are. Um, Man, I wish I had it. I feel like Dan Schiffman, the creator of Coding Train, has a really good email that he sent like when he like introduced himself to the processing community. That's just like, I live in New York with my like two cats, and like it's something like that's really sweet.
That should be like a perma pinned on community, processing
I
community.
know, it's really sweet. Yeah, and so like, this community like stayed really strong, and I think at this time a lot of the folks who were like using processing were kind of like tied to the academic world, and that's like Casey is like a professor at UCLA, and had sort of like been able to keep processing afloat like via all these like academic spaces. And so processing existed, sort of had like a cult. I mean, I would call it like a cult following is really really like the way to put it. And then like this tool called processing.js came out, and this is actually not created by anyone at Processing Foundation, though this time the foundation didn't exist, but actually just someone named John Resig took processing and basically just like translated the whole thing to JavaScript. And this was in 2008 was the first release, and it sort of marks a time when like folks were moving from Java to JavaScript as becoming a more and more popular language. And now it's like JavaScript is like the most, or it like literally is the most popular programming language. And yeah, but this was created and maintained by someone not at Processing Foundation. And it sort of marked like a clear denomination of like, oh, like folks are starting to move towards JavaScript. And then in 2012 the foundation was created, and I think that really the idea here was like there had been so much, like really what was like holding processing together was like academic support, and like the foundation was a way to be able to expand that, like having a nonprofit entity that could then like fundraise and then be able to like pay people to like create new things. And that's how P5 came about, is that like Lauren Lee McCarthy had a fellowship project in 2013 to like reimagine processing for the web. And this is different from processing.js because like here, yes, this I think describes it, where it says, however, this is a description on the P5 website about what P5 is, but it says, however, you're not limited to your drawing canvas. You can think of your whole browser page as your sketch, including HTML5 objects for text, input, video, webcam, and sound. And so the reason this is important is, right, if you look back at processing, you were like kind of tied to this like 2D canvas, and the browser gives you like so many things beyond that. And P5 is really about like reimagining what it could be like in the context of the browser, thus this project. And so this project was started by Lauren in beginning of 2013, and you can think of like P5.js, like just the library itself, as if you look at the like language environment community part of this, like the language, there's also the community here, but just like the library itself is the language here, right? And then this project started to gain traction in 2015. There was a contributors conference, and I mark this as something important because I think it denotes a a sort of like coming together of like a solid vision of what P5 is. And one of the things that came out of this contributors conference is this community statement, which talks about like what P5, like what the community is, right? And it's not just about like folks gathering together on a forum, it's about like creating a space for people. And like I often think about this statement and often just like read it to like remember the kind of space that's being created. And like I kind of want to like go to this picture for a moment, because like when I think that a lot of folks have sort of like stereotypical ideas about like what it means to like work on technology and like who it's for, and like some of these are enforced by like representation and like seeing and sort of like negative or just experiences in technology of it being like a group of like cis white men like working on like technology and making like cool stuff. And like coming back to the community statement and like creating a space that is about inclusion and like making people feel welcome, and just like, yeah, I'm gonna read parts of this. Yeah. So P5 is a community interested in exploring the creation of art and design with technology. We are a community of and in solidarity with people from every gender, identity, and expression, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, language, neurotype, size, ability, class, religion, culture, subculture, political opinion, age, skill level, occupation, and background. We acknowledge that not everyone has the time, financial means, or capacity to actively participate, but we recognize and encourage involvement of all kinds. We facilitate and foster access and empowerment. We're all learners. And like, me sort of like coming upon P5, I had like never read anything like this from a technology space. And I just really wanted to be part of this. Like, who wouldn't want to be part of this? It sounds fun and like nice. It sounds like everyone's going to be nice to me.
It does.
Do you feel like this has changed in the past 5 years? Do you feel like more subsets of technology have like adopted, missions or community statements like this? Or do you feel like P5 and creative coding at large are still pretty unique in like really making that a forefront of what you're doing?
I think that both of these things are true. I think I still have yet to like really know about another community that puts like inclusion and access and being beginner friendly like as like the most important thing. And I think that there are lots of spaces that are really making an effort to like have a commitment to like making a community that feels like uplifting and nourishing and welcoming and like full of care.
I have maybe a little question. I wonder if this like openness of the community spirit, I'd say, the P5JS has anything to do with like how the tool itself is open source. And so a little bit segueing into that, maybe we could also talk about what does that even mean? What does open source even mean? And how does that impact the kind of people that join the community as well?
Totally. Yeah, I have like, I kind of like have some slides about that.
Perfect.
I got you. But I want to talk about first, like, I think like one of the other really powerful things about P5 is like this concept of a contributor. And I think that, again, like lots of folks see contributing to code as like, oh, we're just contributing to a code library is like just writing code. And I think one of the things that Lauren has really developed is like this idea of contributing as something like more than just writing code, like teaching, documentation, making art, activism, bug reporting, outreach, curating, organizing. It's so many different things. And like these are all different things that are part of the P5 community. And like all of this work is important and vital to this project, like staying alive. And, that is true for all open source libraries, but I think especially, or I don't even think it's like especially P5, but I appreciate that there is an emphasis and sort of like a willingness to view contribution to a project as this. And I'll talk a little bit more about like what, like kind of like how open source functions, but just to sort of like tie the loop of like my work on this. And so like, we had like, I've like talked about like P5 as a language and P5 as a community. And so sort of the missing piece of P5 was the environment, right? And so for a while there was a desktop editor for P5 that originally was created by a person named Sam Levine. And this kind of became difficult to maintain, like whenever you create, like this was like an application that you could download. And so it's difficult to maintain an application that you can download because it has to run on different operating systems like Windows and Mac and Linux. And also there are difficulties with, if you have it on like a school computer, it's sometimes difficult to download software. And so it just like was, it just wasn't working to uphold the ideals of P5 of like making this tool accessible. And so then in May 2016, I started making the web editor, and that was my first commit, which I think in the beginning looked something like this. I don't know which this had to be like the really early version because I think you couldn't even like log in or log out. This must be like, like August 2016, August 2016.
I'm so curious, how did you even start? Was it you completely by yourself? Were you like working with other people from the community? Like how did you even start this project? It's obviously grown into this thing that we'll show off.
Well, so it started through like the foundation fellowships. I like applied for a fellowship that I didn't get, but then I just had been in contact with Dan and was like, I just like really want to be involved in open source. I think I was like in a place where I felt really like frustrated with tech communities because like I really wanted to be in a space that like upheld things like this. I felt like I was this person who was like asking all these questions and like everyone was like, don't think about that. And I was like, no, like I want to be talking about this and thinking about this. So I was like in contact with Dan, and then, he and Lauren reached out to me and were like, we have some funding from NYU ITP to work on this tool. Like, would you want to like work on it? And it was like really exciting for me. Like I had never contributed to open source before, and had been working as a web developer for like a couple years and like still pretty new to me. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. I don't really know what I'm getting myself into, but
I mean, I think that underscores like the importance of community, where the reason that, or like one of the ways that you got really into the space was knowing other people from the community. And so whether that's P5 and creative coding or other communities that people might be interested in the tech space, just getting to know folks in the community can help you.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And there's like so many spaces like online to do that. Just like get to know P5 people. And now the editor kind of looks something like this. Maybe the UI is more like refined or whatever, has more features. But yeah, and now I've been like working on this for a few years, and it just like my role is to just like keep it going, and I think like uphold the values of like access defined as like accessibility and inclusion, and like making a tool that can reach people, and like you can have this same environment that really feels, to me, it feels important to like leave the like remnants of processing in, like this play button and things like that. Like what is like processing or P5 without the play button?
The giant play button, yeah.
And that color too.
Yeah, and the pink. Yeah, I mean, I think that yeah, it's like a friendly color, and I think that was a very, very conscious choice of Lauren. But I think and then also like there was another contributors conference in 2019, and again, like I think one of the things that came out of this was really centering, adding features to P5 that are really based around like increasing access over like making a new like something that's like more optimized or like flashy or awesome. Yeah, and that's something that's really important to me. And then I kind of have like some slides about how like open source works, which is fun. But yeah, I don't know if you have like questions.
Do we want to go into that? Do we want to stop and ask? I don't know if you have any specific questions here. Do you want this is also time for if you're in the chat, if you're in the YouTube chat right now and you have questions for Cassie. I think kind of the plan for the rest of this session is to talk about open source in general. We want to show off the P5 web editor because I think you're going to be using it for the rest of the series.
Yeah.
So hopefully introducing people to that. But yeah, any questions from chat? Now would be a good time, I guess. Or G1 if you have anything.
I'm eager to talk more about open source.
Cool, let's do it.
Let's do it. I kind of have more like word slides. I couldn't really find a lot of good images, but I think it's okay. So like, I feel like I learned a lot about sort of like licensing and like how that kind of stuff fairly recently, like within the last year. I never really like thought about it too much for the last like couple years. So like processing and P5 you usually use this abbreviation called FLOSS, which is like free/libre open source software. And the reason that it's like free/libre is because free does not mean free of cost. It means like it like implies like a freedom. And so like what these things mean is, right, so like open source software is a type of computer software in which the source code, right, like the like text that you're writing is released under a license in which the copyright holder grants the users the rights to use, study, change, and distribute the software to anyone and for any purpose. And the reason like you need a license is because when you write software, it's actually protected under like intellectual property law. Like it's something that you write, and so if you don't have a license, it's actually not. It's protected by like the IP law. So it would be so like you can't actually like use that code and then repurpose it. You need to actually give it a license in order to be able to edit that source code. So these types of licenses started coming up where you could like attach this license to your source code, and then folks could like remix that and like make their own versions. And
yeah, I never knew that. So without the license, it's not in fact open source, and you couldn't be able to have somebody else edit it, or
no.
Interesting, I never knew that.
Yeah, so like even this is true of code on GitHub actually. Like if there is no license on your repository, like technically it's like not open source. So that's just like just like the fun world of like intellectual property law.
I feel like this could be like a whole session on its own because there's so much nuance into it, and like there's different levels of how much freedom you can give to the people who use it as well. But yeah,
exactly. Like, and there's different types of licenses. I think one of the really important ones is like this concept of like copyleft, which basically there are like certain types of licenses where you could like take the source code and like make your own copy of it and then make it like private again. And what copyleft does, it makes it so like you can't then like change that license, so it's like the code is private. And that's sort of like an enforcing of it being public. So that was like a really important license that came out. And then like there's also this concept of like free software, and this comes from like the Free Software Foundation, and the term free software has like 4 essential freedoms, which are to run the program, to study and change the program in source code form, to redistribute exact copies, and to distribute modified versions. And so this is about like how you use the software, and these are the things that make, you know, the abbreviation FLOSS or whatever. And just, you know, there's just terms, but
and so you're saying something like P5 is both open source software and also free software.
Yes, exactly. And this is important and on purpose. And I think I have this quote from Casey, or this is pulled from a blog post he wrote about processing and why it was FLOSS. And I'm going to read this whole thing because I think it like really describes it well. But this is like from his perspective talking about processing. He says, "We believe visual artists and designers should be in control of their own software tools. It's not enough to rely on corporations to make what we need. The code and systems that we use shape our work." Yeah, I really like that. I mean, just this so far, like this concept of being in control of the tools you use. Like if you think about, you know, getting a license from Adobe, or, you know, getting a license from, I don't know, the company that makes Maya, but they're very expensive, and like at any time the companies could like choose to shut down these tools. And here is like showing a real dedication to being like, we need to be in control of the tools that we make and shape them. Right. So here, when companies release proprietary platforms and we use them, we don't have the freedoms to modify and expand them. As makers, we feel it's essential to have tools that we create ourselves, tools that are shaped by the needs and desires of the communities and creators that use them. And so open source is a way that allows folks to like have control of their tools and the community. And that's really powerful.
This is a question that you might not know the answer to.
Mm-hmm.
I think Alex froze a little bit.
We'll wait until he comes back.
Hello?
Yay, he's
he
back.
Froze for a moment, so if he asked a question, we don't know what it is.
Hi. It said my internet is unstable, so hopefully I don't drop out again. Cassie, do you know of other communities in the tech space that are similarly like open source minded, like have similar values like this? Or again, is this something that seems pretty unique or pretty unique to like creative coding?
I think Blender has a big open source community.
Blender is maybe one of the most similar, because I feel like Blender just like has such a big community. Because I was just like thinking of like, what are other tools that sort of have these like 3 things: the like language, environment, community. And I feel like Blender is a really rad tool.
For those of you who don't know what Blender is, just to really quickly say it, it's an open source software that you can do 3D environment creation in. I think that's like a really small little thing that you can do with Blender, but basically I think their goal essentially is it aims you to go all the way from like creating your 3D assets all the way into like creating like a whole scene and movie with your 3D what are they called? Models, yeah.
Yeah, you can do animations. It's a really cool tool. Yeah. Oh man, I forgot to say one really important thing about processing in P5 is like one of the other like core values. It's like the what's called like low floor, high ceiling, and that like it's like, you know, tried to be like a low barrier to entry, but also I think because it uses code syntax and there are lots of folks who write like add-on libraries, and I think really tied into this statement here of like, you know, the community being in control of the tool. Like you can make an add-on library and be like, oh, like P5 doesn't have this thing. I wanna make like a text editing, like a text manipulation library, or like, you know, processing doesn't have this thing, I'm going to work on it. And that's really powerful. And that, like, you know, if somehow P5 changes and your library breaks, like, you have a say in that process, versus like, you know, if you wrote like an add-on for Photoshop or something and like that changed, it would just kind of be like, you know, and this, yeah. I think an example of this happening is like a lot of folks have made like art Twitter bots, and like the sort of over the past few years, the API for like using Twitter has really changed and caused a lot of like art to just like perish.
Stop working.
Yeah.
I do want to make sure that we have some time to demo the web editor too, Cassie.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go through the rest of these real quick, but I think another thing I want to talk about is just sort of like some of the pitfalls of open source, and just like some of the things I'm thinking about. And so there was a survey in 2017 from GitHub about open source software, and they found that the gender imbalance in open source software remains profound. In the survey, 95% of respondents were men, just 3% were women, and 1% are non-binary. And like, why is this? You know, I think there's lots of not only gender disparity in the tech world, but it's like especially bad, or especially
prominent,
yeah, in open source. And like, why is that? And you know, one of the reasons is that like there's sort of this implicit narrative of like unpaid labor in open source. And if you think about like who has the time and like who has the privilege of like, you know, free time in order to work on open source, it's like going to be predominantly people who are in a position of privilege. And so this is pulled from a blog post called "The Ethics of Unpaid Labor in the Open Source Software Community." And this like pulls from some tweets where it says, whether free time activities are called work or play, the existence of free time to do them is a privilege. And so when you have a space that relies on free labor in order to do work, it's only going to be, you know, it's going to like perpetuate sort of like structural inequalities. And so here's a tweet that Lauren asked, where she said, how do you make a volunteer-based open source project sustainable? Is this even possible? Or is this even possible? I really need some help figuring this out. And this is something that I think about a lot, and you know, have talked to Lauren about, is like, how do we make these projects sustainable, where like we're releasing the software free of cost, and like, you know, lots of folks are using these tools for free. And you know, that I think is one of the reasons for having like the foundation, but also just like a real dedication to paying people for their work. But there are also different types of giving people value for their contributions. But I'm going to read this quote from Lauren, where she says, for me, sustainability means not just preserving the sanity of the people in charge, but also extending the opportunity to work on it to people who would love to be a part of the project if we could provide them a means of access. And so, yeah, I think to me, this means like reaching out to people who are not represented, or people who don't feel welcome, and like giving them what they need, whether it's like, you know, money or care or support or whatever they need in order to support them. And I also like, you know, just to like sort of wrap this up and then go to the web editor. Like, I was talking to someone about this project, I don't know when it was, like worked with the P5 web editor, and they were like, I was like talking about how I was still working on it, and they were like, well, it works, so like what else is there to do?
A lot, so much more.
They meant it like really genuinely. It wasn't like a like they were trying to be
like a backhanded compliment.
No. Yeah. It was like not intended to be like patronizing at all. They meant it like totally genuinely, and it sort of like made me think about the invisible work that goes into these projects. You know, whether it's like managing all the issues that come up on GitHub, or like, you know, for example, this is some screenshot I took of like, there are currently like over 4 million sketches on the web editor. So it's like managing a huge amount of data. And then also just like thinking about how to make these projects sustainable and creating a structure in place. So like Lauren made an open call for a new P5 lead to sort of like replace her and like be a new steward for the project. And so that's something I'm thinking about all the time. But now let's talk about the web editor now that we know about open source.
Cassie, before we go there, could you give a plug of like, if people are watching this and it feels like everything that you've said really resonates with them, like how do they get involved? I feel like something that I feel a lot of the time is feeling intimidated by entering these communities, feeling imposter syndrome, all that kind of stuff. So if somebody wants to get involved specifically in P5 and processing, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say, I'm going to go to like a browser window. I mean, I think if you're like, I don't know anything. I mean, obviously it would be like, you know, learning P5 from like the Codecademy.
It's a nice plug.
It's great, but also like
our course is also free.
Yeah,
that's true, which is nice.
Yeah, but also like Dan's YouTube channel is, I think, a really accessible place. There's the P5 Disc, or you know, I think like here there's like a forum that you can ask questions on, and like, yeah, if you want to get help.
Cool.
But yeah, I think like also just looking on Twitter and kind of like seeing what other people are up to. There's also gotta move things around, Processing Foundation. There's also like a Processing Community Day that happens. I think that's under yeah, there's going to be one this year, like I think an official one in the summer. But yeah,
cool. Yeah, and we can put like all of those links in the YouTube description, or do you want to? I wonder even if putting this kind of stuff on the Codecademy course might be helpful. But yeah, I think just like for me, I would struggle to do this, and I think I even do struggle with this, where I don't really participate in as many open source projects as I want to, or like P5 I love and I'm a huge advocate of, but have like never interacted in the community. So I think just encouraging folks to like take that first step and get involved in the community if this is something that speaks to you. Just that first step is like probably the hardest part.
Yeah, and I mean, I think getting involved is like as simple as using the tool, you know, like by using it, like you're supporting, you know, like you're just like another person who can like then share your experience about like what it's like to learn this tool and like how to make it better. And better for me is like maybe more accessible and like more stable. And I think like that is really one of the big parts of creating the web editor is making it accessible, right? And one of like the cool things about the web editor is like basically you have this setup where you have like code on the left and like a preview on the right, and then when you open it, you get like a sort of like generic gray square, which is not that exciting. But if you're like, oh, let me look at some other code, you can go to the examples and I think I wanted this one. Yeah, you can sort of like look at the other code that folks have made. Oh no, that's not the one I wanted. Oh no, sorry. Examples. Examples. Video. I think video pixels. Yeah, you can sort of like see what it looks like. So here's an example of one that is like pixelating a video, and I can be like, oh, cool, this is fun. But then if I'm like, you know, I want this to be, rather than it be this fingers one, I want it to be like a webcam of me, I can just easily like comment this out, right? And then make this, rather than it being this video, I can be like create capture video. And I think I have to do fingers dot size
640.
oh wait, yeah, 320.
Oh,
240. Right.
Slow.
And then now I have this webcam that's like me, right? And so I can like, right. And then from here, I could be like, oh, rather than all these dots being black, I want them to be, where it could be, how would I do this?
Darkness.
But this is,
But the color, I think, is just being default black.
yeah. Why is this? Oh, times darkness. Oh, I could just do like fill 255. We can make it like red. Let's see if that works. Yeah, right. And so then I could start like playing around with this and like have my own version of this. And I don't need to like download anything, you know. For so many coding languages, it's like, okay, download a text editor, then like add this library as a dependency or whatever. And you're like, what do these words mean? Yeah, and I think like all of the stuff of like getting P5 loaded into your sketch is really hidden. And, you know, like once you make an account on the web editor, then like all your work is saved. So if I like save this now, like now this is part of my account. And then if I go to like my sketches, I have like, you know, whatever million sketches I have.
Millions of things.
Yeah. And you can also, you can like manipulate videos and images in here. And so here I can upload files to like images and stuff. I can also, and the other cool thing is like I can share my work. So let's say I was like, I think this is great. You know, I can then like have this version that's just like this in the frame, or
the embed is really cool. It looks like, so you can embed that in your website if you have it, or
I think this is the one that it just doesn't even have the bar. Like, it's great for sharing. What else is really useful? And then I guess, you know, the other, you know, there's like keyboard shortcuts. You also can link, there's a link to like the reference if you want to learn, get familiar with the P5 library itself. And then also like want to link to the like report a bug and like the GitHub repository. Because like one thing that you can do as a person, you know, contributing to P5 is to like report bugs. And if like you notice that something is wrong, like you can just be like, hey, I feel like this website isn't working as I think it should. And like no one here is going to be like, you know, and like maybe it is a bug or maybe it's you're not doing something right, but like no one here is going to be like, wow, I can't believe you couldn't figure that out. Like it's like, you know, I mean, first of all, it's going to be like me responding, and I'm, you know, I'm just going to be here to like be friendly and support you. But this is a really big way that you can contribute, is just by reporting bugs or just like putting ideas on here of things you would want to see. And, you know, for example, like, and one thing that you could contribute is like there have been some folks who have been doing translations, and so now it's in Spanish and Japanese and Hindi. So like can now experience web editor in Hindi, which is really cool. And that's a thing you can contribute. Yeah.
I think that's a really big thing though. It really opens up this like not only just P5 web editor, but like programming, visual things in general to a wider community than people who just speak English.
Yeah.
That example tab is amazing. I want to go look at some of those other example things and play around with it.
Yeah, and like all of them are pulled from like the website, like the P5 website, but it's just here you can just quickly be like, oh, I actually want to change something and see how it looks. And that I think is the biggest, that is like the fundamental way to learn how to do coding, I think, is to just take what other people have done and be like, how can I change this and make this different? Like, what does changing this number do? You know? That's the biggest thing.
I think it also, like the thing that I really like P5 web editor for is that not only can you share the code that you've written for someone else, but also if you open the file tabs, you see that it is still a web page, that it has an index.html, it has sketch.js. It doesn't hide the fact that it is just like a little blank space, but it shows you all the files that goes into creating that window in the preview.
Yeah, and like I think this is something that's like a little bit different from like other code editors, like CodePen. I mean, definitely on Glitch you can do this, but to me, like upholding this idea of like low floor, high ceiling was like in the end, I want to be able to like just download this sketch as a website. Like I could just download this, and then
Oh,
I
yeah.
have a zip file that's like all of these files together. And then I could literally just take that and like put it on whatever hosting platform I want. Like if you could use, because it's all front end, you can put it on GitHub Pages or whatever you use. NeoCities. Yeah, I love NeoCities. Yeah, so yeah, to me it's really important that like you can kind of see and really upholds that ideal of like when you're writing P5 or processing, like you're writing code syntax.
Yeah.
And like understanding that.
I think this is a great way to, like, if there's people watching who are going through the Learn P5JS course, if you want to like really go deep down into the creative coding and P5JS in general, this is a great way to take your projects off of our Codecademy platform and move your code into the P5 web editor, so you can keep track of the different versions of the sketches that you are building. You can even load your own sketch and then make a different version of that and try out different things with that same fundamental code, but maybe doing different styles and things things like that to it. So like I said, I think, did I mention this? I forget. But from next live streaming series, we're going to be using the P5 web editor to work on, so that during our live series we'll start programming from scratch on these on like a blank P5JS sketch on the web editor, and then after the live stream we'll add the link to the web editor into the description of the YouTube video, so that you guys can take that code and then remix it even further and make it your own if you want.
And G1, what project are you working on next week?
Next week, we're going to be looking at what we call the generative art creator. So we have these like little visualizations that you can trigger with a mouse press, and then you can create your own little generative art drawing. And you can also click on the canvas and download that as an image file that you can use anywhere you want. And we're going to build that on the web editor.
Cool.
Awesome.
Cassie, anything else you want to say or plug or tell people to check out or anything at all?
I guess the only other thing I want to plug is that there's currently a fellowship application open for the foundation. It closes however long away, April 2nd is 1 week. But I want to emphasize that like you don't need to be a coder in order to apply, and it's open to any type of work. It's really just about being part of. It's just like an opportunity to get some money to be part of the community. So if you're maybe like you are familiar with P5, but wanting to get involved more, this is a great way, or familiar with coding and not familiar with P5, it's a great way.
And this is how you got started, right? This is like similar to the fellowship.
Yeah.
Kind of.
I mean, this is like how I got started. Yeah.
That's cool.
Thank you so much, Cassie, for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So much fun.
Cool. Okay. Well, yeah. With that, I guess we will be back next week for another project that G1's gonna walk through. Yeah. Thanks so much, Cassie. And
thank you.
We'll talk to you all later.
Thank you. Bye.